chosen one before you continue. Stop for a second and pay attention to what is happening beneath the surface of your thoughts. There is a feeling that has been growing inside you for days, maybe even longer. It is difficult to explain with ordinary words. It feels like pressure and anticipation at the same time. It feels as though something invisible is gathering momentum behind the scenes of your life. Part of you has tried to ignore it. Part of you has attempted to explain it away with logic. Yet no matter how many distractions appear, that feeling keeps returning. That is because what you are experiencing is not random. It is not a product of imagination. It is not another ordinary evening passing through the calendar. You have arrived at a crossroads that was forming long before you became consciously aware of it. Every disappointment that forced you to become stronger, every delay that made you question the timing of your life, every chapter that seemed confusing while you were living through it, was quietly moving you toward this exact point. Looking back, many of those experiences may have appeared disconnected. They may have looked like mistakes, setbacks, or unnecessary suffering, but from a higher perspective, they were pieces of a larger design. They were shaping your awareness, preparing your perception, teaching you lessons you could not have learned any other way. And now something significant is beginning to move. A completely different direction is becoming available to you. A new possibility is emerging. Yet there is a truth very few people understand when moments like this arrive. The greatest opportunities are not usually lost through dramatic failure. They are lost through a single unconscious choice. Entire futures can quietly disappear because of one small mistake that seems harmless in the moment. That is why what you do next matters more than you realize. Most people imagine transformation as something mystical that happens outside of them. They think the universe changes circumstances while they simply wait for results to appear. But true alignment works differently. When life begins opening a new path, it also provides support systems, signals, lessons, and practical tools designed to help you sustain that new reality. Nothing important appears without preparation. Nothing meaningful arrives without structure. The fact that you are hearing this message right now is not an accident, any more than the experiences that brought you here. There is a reason your attention landed on these words. There is a reason something inside you felt compelled to keep listening. People who are genuinely ready for change recognize support when it appears. They do not always understand it immediately, but they feel it. They sense that something is being placed in front of them for a reason. Readiness is not about certainty. It is about willingness. It is about recognizing that life is presenting an opportunity and choosing not to turn away from it. Because what is happening beneath the surface right now is larger than it appears. There is movement taking place in dimensions of your experience that your physical senses cannot fully measure. Yet your deeper awareness already knows it is real. Somewhere within you, there is a recognition that cannot be explained logically. It is a feeling that something is approaching, something important, something capable of changing the direction of your life from the inside out. Imagine standing before a doorway that cannot be seen with ordinary eyes. It does not open because of effort alone. It does not respond to force, pressure, or struggle. Instead, it responds to your state of being. It responds to awareness. It responds to the frequency created by your thoughts, your beliefs, and your relationship with yourself. At this moment, that doorway exists closer than you think. Most people will never notice it because they're too distracted by noise, fear, and endless external demands. Yet a small number of people sense its presence before any evidence appears. They feel the shift before they see the results. They recognize movement before circumstances change. And if you're honest with yourself, you've been feeling it too. That strange restlessness that appears for no obvious reason. That sensation that something old is ending while something new is trying to emerge. That quiet certainty that your life cannot remain exactly as it has been. These feelings are not asking you to work harder. They are asking you to become more conscious. They are inviting you to pay attention. Yet this is exactly where many people lose their way. The moment uncertainty appears, they begin questioning everything they already know deep inside. They start doubting the signals they have been receiving. They convince themselves they need more proof, more certainty, more guarantees. But opportunities connected to higher awareness rarely wait forever. They do not argue, they do not chase, they simply continue moving. When a person hesitates long enough, the opening becomes harder to recognize. The path remains available, but it becomes hidden behind layers of distraction and second-guessing. You may be wondering why all of this seems to be happening now, why your emotions feel different, why familiar patterns suddenly feel uncomfortable, why certain relationships, habits, and perspectives no longer fit the person you are becoming. The answer is simple but profound. You have outgrown the version of yourself that once lived comfortably inside the old reality. The cycles you repeatedly tolerated can no longer contain your growth. The burdens you carried have become incompatible with the direction your spirit is trying to move. Eventually, life reaches a point where adjustment becomes necessary. That adjustment often feels chaotic while it is happening. Things appear to fall apart, situations become uncertain, familiar structures begin shifting. Yet what appears to be destruction is often correction. What feels like loss is frequently preparation. Certain foundations must crack before stronger ones can be built. Certain illusions must dissolve before a deeper truth can emerge. And that process is unfolding now. But this goes beyond personal circumstances. The role you are stepping into carries greater significance than you currently understand. You are not simply changing a few habits or entering a temporary season. You are being invited into a different level of awareness, and awareness requires responsibility. Every thought becomes important. Every reaction matters. Every choice either strengthens your connection to the emerging path or weakens it. This is why the next truth is so important. There is one mistake capable of slowing this entire transition. The mistake is not failure. It is not lack of talent. It is not lack of opportunity. The mistake is allowing fear to disguise itself as reason. Fear rarely arrives looking dangerous. It often sounds intelligent. It sounds cautious. It sounds practical. It tells you to lower expectations. It encourages you to stay where things feel predictable. It reminds you of past disappointments and presents them as evidence that nothing new is possible. But beneath all of those arguments lies the same motive: control. Fear wants to keep you attached to what is familiar because familiar feels safe. Yet safety and growth do not always travel together. The moment you mistake fear for wisdom, your energy begins drifting backward toward the reality you were meant to leave behind. The universe does not punish that choice. It simply reflects it. Whatever timeline you invest your awareness into becomes stronger. Whatever possibility you repeatedly feed with attention becomes more real. This is why the emotional intensity you have been experiencing recently feels so unusual. The exhaustion, the anticipation, the sudden waves of emotion, the sensation that something is changing even when you cannot identify exactly what it is. These are common signs of transition. Old identities are loosening their grip. Former versions of yourself are fading. Attachments that once defined you are losing power. During this process, it is normal to feel disconnected from certain people, places, and perspectives. It can feel as though pieces of your world are slipping away, but what is actually happening is separation from energies that cannot accompany you into the next chapter. The challenge comes when your mind tries to return to what it already knows. Human beings naturally seek familiarity. Even painful familiarity can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. That is why awareness is essential. Every time you consciously observe your thoughts instead of automatically believing them, you strengthen your connection to the new path. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you create space for greater clarity. You were never meant to spend your life shrinking yourself to fit expectations that do not belong to you. You were not designed to numb your intuition or ignore your deeper knowing. The sensitivity that once made you feel different is actually one of your greatest strengths. It allows you to perceive shifts before they become visible. It helps you recognize truth before others can see it. It guides you toward opportunities that logic alone would overlook. Yet sensitivity must be paired with discipline. Without awareness, sensitivity becomes distraction, and distraction is one of the fastest ways to lose sight of the path unfolding before you. This is why your focus matters so much right now. Observe your thoughts. Observe your emotions. Observe every impulse that attempts to pull you backward. Do not fight them. Simply notice them, because the clarity required for your next step cannot emerge from a mind consumed by noise. And here is the truth many people will not understand until much later. The shift you have been waiting for is not approaching. It has already begun. The first signal has already appeared in your life. Perhaps it arrived through an unexpected change. Perhaps it came through a realization that altered the way you see yourself. Perhaps it appeared as a strange moment when everything suddenly felt different, even though nothing obvious had changed. Whatever form it took, that was the invitation. Quiet, subtle, easy to dismiss, yet incredibly powerful. Invitations like these do not remain frozen in time. They continue moving forward. They evolve. They expand. And whether a person notices them or not, they keep unfolding. If you recognize that signal even briefly, then you are already stepping into motion. You are already participating in the transition. But if doubt convinces you to ignore it, the opportunity is not vanished. It has simply become more difficult to see, hidden beneath additional layers of uncertainty, waiting for the moment when your awareness becomes sharp enough to recognize what has been there all along. Everything from this point forward depends on how you respond to what is happening now, because the stage you are entering is unlike anything that came before it. Many people believe that once they begin moving toward a higher path, resistance disappears. They imagine the old reality simply fades away as the new one arrives. But that is not how transformation works. In fact, the closer you move toward a profound shift, the stronger the illusion often becomes. This is the part that catches so many people by surprise. Just when they think they are making progress, life suddenly feels heavier, circumstances become more complicated, relationships become more demanding, doubts emerge with an intensity that seems completely out of proportion. It can feel as though everything is moving backward. It can feel as though the universe has changed its mind. But what if that pressure is not evidence that you are failing? What if it is evidence that you are approaching the threshold? The reality you are preparing to leave does not surrender quietly. It attempts to keep your attention. It tries to convince you that nothing has changed. It presents familiar fears, familiar frustrations, and familiar emotional patterns because familiarity is its greatest source of influence. Human beings naturally drift toward what they already know, even when what they know has caused them pain. That is why awareness becomes your greatest protection, because not everything that feels urgent deserves your reaction. Not everything that appears true is actually truth. The illusion only maintains its strength when it can pull you into unconscious participation. The moment you stop automatically reacting and begin consciously observing, something remarkable happens. Its influence weakens, the emotional charge begins to dissolve, and the power you thought you had lost quietly returns to you. Beneath all of this, there is a deeper process unfolding. It is happening beyond visible circumstances and beyond surface-level events. Every moment, your inner state is communicating with the reality around you, not because some external force is standing above you keeping score, but because existence responds continuously to the energy you embody. Every belief you feed, every emotion you repeatedly return to, every thought pattern you strengthen sends a signal outward. And during periods of major transition, those signals become especially important. This is not about becoming flawless. It is not about controlling every feeling or monitoring every thought. It is about consciousness. When fear takes over without being questioned, when frustration becomes your automatic response, when doubt quietly begins directing your decisions, you reinforce the same energetic patterns that belong to the reality you are trying to outgrow. But when you create even a brief pause between stimulus and response, when you allow yourself to witness your emotions instead of becoming them, you begin aligning with a completely different trajectory. That is why seemingly insignificant moments carry extraordinary weight right now. Most people believe their future is determined by dramatic decisions. In reality, the direction of a life is often shaped by countless quiet choices made when nobody is watching. A thought you choose not to follow, an argument you choose not to engage in, a fear you choose to observe instead of obey. These moments appear small, but they are the invisible architecture of transformation. As this process deepens, something else often occurs. The past begins calling your name. Memories you have not considered in years may suddenly return. Old connections may reappear unexpectedly. Circumstances that seemed finished may somehow find their way back into your experience. At first, it may feel as though life is offering you another chance. It may feel as though unresolved chapters are demanding closure. Sometimes that is true, but not always. Some things return because they belong in your future. Others return because they need to reveal whether you have truly changed. This distinction matters more than you realize. The reality you are leaving behind understands your habits. It understands the emotional patterns that once kept you trapped. It remembers the places where you sought comfort, even when that comfort came at the expense of your growth. And it often uses those familiar pathways as one final attempt to regain your attention. If you unconsciously step back into old emotional reactions, you strengthen those pathways once again. But if you recognize what is happening, if you see the pattern without becoming lost inside it, you create separation. And within that separation lies freedom. A pattern that cannot control your reaction can no longer control your future. While the external world grows louder, there's one quality that becomes increasingly valuable. It is something many people underestimate because it does not look powerful from the outside. That quality is inner silence. Not silence as avoidance, not silence as suppression, but silence as conscious observation, the ability to experience without immediately responding, the ability to witness without becoming consumed, the ability to remain present even when emotions are demanding your attention. This is one of the most powerful skills available to you now. When you stop rushing to explain yourself, defend yourself, or justify every feeling that arises, you create space. And in that space, awareness expands. You begin noticing connections you previously overlooked. You recognize triggers before they take control. You see recurring patterns with a clarity that was impossible before. What once felt automatic becomes visible. And once something becomes visible, it can finally change. Many people misunderstand periods like this because they believe they are being evaluated. They imagine every action is being judged by some higher authority, deciding whether they are worthy or unworthy. But the process is far simpler and far more profound. Life is not standing outside of you handing out rewards or punishments. It is reflecting what you continuously embody. If fear becomes your foundation, uncertainty appears everywhere. If clarity becomes your foundation, opportunities begin revealing themselves. There is no condemnation in this process. There is only reflection. Reality mirrors consciousness. That is why your inner world matters so much. Someone can appear successful externally while remaining trapped internally. Another person can seem uncertain on the surface while already standing at the edge of a breakthrough. The determining factor is not what is visible, it is the frequency beneath it. And right now, your inner state is shaping far more than you realize. There is another truth you need to hear. You may believe there is still plenty of time. You may imagine that this transformation will arrive gradually, giving you endless opportunities to prepare. But major shifts rarely announce themselves dramatically. They often arrive disguised as ordinary moments. A conversation, a decision, a reaction, a single choice that appears insignificant at first. These are the moments where paths diverge, not through grand spectacles, but through subtle actions that quietly redirect the future. That is why presence matters. When the moment arrives, you'll not respond according to who you hope to become. You'll respond according to the level of awareness you have cultivated today. This is not meant to create anxiety. It is meant to awaken attention, because your power exists only in the present moment, not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, right here, right now. And despite the confusion you may sometimes feel, despite the emotional intensity, despite the uncertainty surrounding parts of your life, you are far closer to the shift than you currently realize. The gap between who you have been and who you are becoming is not as large as it appears. Much of that distance exists only in the mind. The soul already recognizes the path. The deeper part of you already knows where you are going. That is why the pull remains so strong. That is why you cannot fully return to who you used to be. You are not pursuing something outside yourself. You are moving toward a deeper expression of something that has always existed within you. And as this process continues, another stage begins to emerge, one that requires even greater honesty. Because what comes next will not merely challenge your awareness, it will reveal what still remains hidden within it. You are entering a phase that can best be understood as a mirror, a period where life begins reflecting your inner landscape with startling accuracy. People may suddenly provoke emotions you thought were long resolved. Situations may unfold in ways that seem unfair, confusing, or emotionally charged. Feelings you believed had already healed may rise again from unexpected depths. At first glance, It may appear that life is working against you, but something very different is happening. The reflections appearing around you are revealing what still exists beneath conscious awareness, not because you are being punished, not because you are failing, but because anything hidden cannot be released, anything unconscious cannot be transformed. The greatest danger during this phase is misunderstanding what you are seeing. If you interpret every trigger as an attack, you will react, and reaction strengthens the very patterns you are trying to transcend. But if you recognize these moments as reflections, if you become curious instead of defensive, the entire experience changes. Resistance softens, awareness grows, and the mirror begins serving you instead of controlling you. What you are feeling now carries valuable information. Emotional triggers are not obstacles standing in your way. They are doorways disguised as discomfort. Every surge of irritation, every moment of sadness, every wave of uncertainty contains a message pointing towards something that still requires your attention. Most people spend their lives running from these experiences. They suppress them, distract themselves from them, or attempt to overpower them. They confuse strength with control. But true strength during this phase looks very different. True strength is remaining present. It is allowing what arises to reveal itself without immediately trying to escape, suppress, or solve it. And that understanding becomes essential for what is about to unfold next. What happens from this point forward depends entirely on whether you continue choosing awareness when it would be easier to drift back into old habits. Because the deeper truth is that transformation is never decided in a single dramatic moment. It is decided through repeated acts of consciousness. It is decided through the quiet choice to remain present when your mind wants to escape. It is decided through your willingness to recognize what is happening within you before it becomes visible around you. Every experience you have moved through recently has been preparing you for this exact lesson, not because life wanted to challenge you unnecessarily, but because awareness cannot be developed through comfort alone. It emerges when you are given the opportunity to choose differently than you once did. This is why the mistake that delays everything is rarely obvious. It does not appear as a major failure. It appears as a gradual return to unconscious patterns. It begins when you stop observing your thoughts and start believing every one of them. It begins when fear disguises itself as practicality and convinces you that staying where you are is safer than moving toward what is calling you forward. It begins when temporary emotions are given authority over permanent decisions. That is how people unknowingly reconnect themselves to realities they were already in the process of leaving. The pattern feels natural because it is familiar. The reaction feels justified because it has been repeated so many times before. But familiarity is not always wisdom. Sometimes familiarity is simply evidence of an old cycle repeating itself. The version of you that reacts automatically belongs to a chapter that is ending. The version of you that pauses, observes, and consciously chooses belongs to the chapter that is beginning. That distinction matters more now than ever before. As this transition continues, you need to understand something important. The opportunity to move forward will not announce itself in a way that makes its significance obvious. There will be no grand signal appearing in the sky. There will be no moment where everything suddenly pauses, so you can make a perfectly informed decision. Instead, the moment arrives disguised as something ordinary. A familiar conversation, an unexpected emotional trigger, a situation that feels strangely similar to one you have already experienced. At first glance, it may seem insignificant, yet hidden within it is a question. Have you truly changed? Not in theory, not in understanding, not in what you say you believe, but in practice. When life presents the same pattern again, do you respond differently than before? This is where real transformation becomes visible. The universe is not searching for perfection. It is reflecting your level of growth. If the same trigger creates the same reaction, the same reality continues. But if awareness interrupts the pattern, even briefly, something shifts. A different future becomes available. A new possibility opens. This is how timelines change. Not through extraordinary events, but through ordinary moments experienced with extraordinary consciousness. You may already feel the tension of standing between two worlds. One side feels known. It carries routines, habits, relationships, and emotional responses that have been part of your life for a long time. Even when those things were limiting, they provided a sense of predictability. The other side feels less defined. It feels uncertain because it has not fully revealed itself yet. And yet there is something about it that continues pulling your attention forward. Something within you recognizes its energy. This creates an uncomfortable space between what was and what is becoming. Many people mistake this space for confusion. They believe something is wrong because they no longer feel fully connected to the old reality, while still being unable to see the complete shape of the new one. But this feeling is not confusion. It is transition. It is evidence that movement is already occurring. The danger is remaining suspended between both realities for too long, because the longer you hesitate, the stronger the pull of familiarity becomes. The old path requires very little awareness. It asks only that you repeat what you already know. The new path requires something more demanding. It requires presence. It requires trust. It requires a willingness to continue forward before every answer has been provided. This is where many chosen ones encounter their greatest challenge. They believe trust means certainty. They believe they should already know exactly how everything will unfold before taking action. But that is not the type of trust being asked of you now. Real trust emerges when certainty is absent. It is the willingness to keep moving despite not having complete visibility. It is the decision to honor what you know internally even when your mind continues asking for additional proof. Doubt may still be present. Questions may still exist. Yet trust means refusing to place those doubts in control of your choices. For many people, this feels unnatural because they have spent their entire lives relying exclusively on logic. They were taught to move only when evidence appeared first. Yet some transitions operate differently. They reveal themselves step by step. You are shown enough to take the next action, then the next piece becomes visible. Then another, then another, then another. This unfolding requires participation. It cannot be understood from a distance. It must be experienced through movement, and that is exactly what is happening now. You can sense it even if you struggle to explain it. There is momentum building beneath the surface of your life. A feeling that events are converging towards something meaningful, a sense that lessons, challenges, realizations, and decisions are beginning to connect into a larger picture. This is not your imagination. It is the natural result of everything you have been learning, the awareness you have cultivated, the patterns you have started recognizing, the emotional responses you have begun questioning. All of it is leading here. This is not the moment to become careless with your attention. This is the moment to sharpen it. Because what comes next is not merely about understanding what must change. It is about releasing what can no longer continue with you, and release is often where resistance becomes strongest. There are things you cannot carry into the reality that is opening before you. Some beliefs have completed their purpose. Some attachments have reached their natural conclusion. Some identities have become too small for the person you are becoming. Yet letting go can feel surprisingly difficult, because what is familiar often creates the illusion of safety. Even when something no longer supports your growth, part of you may still feel connected to it. This is why release is frequently mistaken for loss, but they are not the same thing. Loss takes something away without your participation. Release is a conscious act of alignment. It is the recognition that certain energies, relationships, beliefs, or versions of yourself are no longer compatible with the direction your life is moving. The moment you stop carrying what cannot evolve with you, space is created for what truly belongs, and that space becomes one of the most powerful forces in your transformation. As you approach this stage, do not be surprised if fear attempts one final appearance. In many ways, this is predictable. Whenever a pattern begins losing its influence, it often becomes louder before it disappears. Fear may suddenly seem convincing. It may question your decisions. It may challenge your confidence. It may encourage you to delay, to wait, to hold on just a little longer. Yet none of these reactions necessarily mean you are moving in the wrong direction. Often, they mean the opposite. Fear frequently intensifies when control is slipping away. The stronger the attachment, the stronger the resistance to releasing it. That is why awareness remains essential. You do not need to eliminate fear. You simply need to stop allowing it to become the author of your actions. Observe it, acknowledge it, learn from it, but do not surrender your direction to it, because once you move through that fear consciously, something extraordinary appears on the other side. Clarity, not borrowed certainty, not temporary reassurance, genuine clarity rooted in direct experience. You may already recognize another part of this process. The feeling that you no longer fully identify with the person you used to be, yet you may also feel uncertain about who you are becoming. This in-between state can feel strained. Familiar identities begin dissolving while new ones have not fully emerged. But this is not a problem that needs fixing. It is evidence that transformation is underway. Old structures are making room for something more authentic. The person emerging from this process will not be a manufactured version of yourself created to impress others. It will be a more honest expression of who you have always been, beneath conditioning, fear, and limitation. And as that authenticity strengthens, something remarkable happens. The shift you have been waiting for no longer feels distant. It begins revealing itself through small but meaningful moments. A trigger that no longer controls you, a situation that once created anxiety, but now creates calm, a reaction you consciously choose not to repeat. These moments may appear insignificant to others, yet they are powerful indicators that your reality is already changing. Before circumstances transform externally, transformation occurs internally. That is the order of creation. It cannot be reversed. The reality you enter tomorrow is being shaped by the awareness you embody today, and that is why consistency matters. The new timeline is not something you briefly visit. It is something you continuously choose. No one else can make that choice on your behalf. No sign, message, teacher, or guide can walk this path for you. They may point toward the door. They may help you recognize it. But only you can decide whether to step through it. And ultimately, that decision is expressed not through words, but through actions, through what you choose when nobody is watching, through how you respond when uncertainty appears, through whether you remain aware when it would be easier to react unconsciously. This is where your true power lives, not in what you claim to believe, but in how you move when belief is tested. And now, as everything begins converging toward this moment, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The reality you have been preparing for is not somewhere far away, waiting to arrive. It is already unfolding through every thought, every emotion, every choice, and every act of awareness you bring into the present moment. The warning has remained the same from the beginning because it is the only warning that truly matters. The greatest obstacle is not failure. It is unconsciousness. It is forgetting to observe. It is returning to automatic patterns without recognizing them. It is allowing fear, doubt, or old conditioning to guide your actions without questioning their authority. Avoid that trap and the path continues opening before you. Fall back into it, and the journey slows until awareness returns. The shift itself is already in motion. The only question remaining is how consciously you choose to experience it.